we are operating, environment where we are operating. Yeah. Okay. Environmental performance, as defined by the ISO 14001, says is performance related to the management of our environmental aspects. We already know what aspects are our activities that can impact on the environment. The ISO 14001:2015 is an internationally agreed standard that sets out requirements for the environmental management system of our various organizations. The standard has actually been implemented worldwide. More than 138 countries have implemented this standard. And as at 2019, when this survey was carried out, over 300,000 companies have been certified to this standard. This number is even underestimated because at that survey, US, Japan, and some few other countries did not even participate. In Nigeria, as at 2020, the number of organizations that have certified to this particular standard is just 29. Looking at our size and our population, I think this number is grossly inadequate. It shows how we don't care much about our environment. The custodians of this standard is either the Standards Organization of Nigeria when it is domesticated or the ISO. So we'll talk briefly about Standards Organization of Nigeria, which is a federal government agency that was established in 1971. It's in charge of our standards, whether in any field, as long as it is a national standard. It's Standards Organization of Nigeria that is in charge. Other functions of the organization include regulatory functions, certification, especially management system, products and processes, operation of our standards library. We also carry out training, and then we also, for now, are in charge of the National Metrology Institute. The laboratory services are also available and other functions of the organization. The ISO, International Organization for Standardization, is a non-governmental organization that has its head office in Geneva, and it was established in 1947. Usually decisions are reached by voting, and all nations have equal voting rights. The basic function of this organization is to develop standards, whether process, system, or product standards. And the standards are usually voluntary, but they are market-driven. And it's based on consensus by stakeholders. If the stakeholders have agreed, 75% agree that the standard is okay, then it goes on. And like we said, it's being implemented worldwide. We have, for instance, the ISO 14001 have been implemented in over 138 countries. What are the key benefits for implementing these particular standards? You will have improved environmental performance, reduced liability because of your sensitivity to your obligations. You have competitive advantages because once organizations know you are responsible, they patronize you more. You have improved compliance with your obligations, reduce costs because of your prudent use of resources, fewer environmental accidents, employee involvement, improved public image, and industrial efficiency. Others include like improved employee retention. It also aids technology transfer and even preserve our culture and improve our perception of stakeholders. There are principles that this standard is operating on, just like other management system standards, which include like the risk-based thinking, plan, do, take, and act, principle of Demings, and the process approach.
The risk-based thinking expects that right from the planning process, you think of all the things that will deter your achievement of objectives and consider them in your planning process. The plan, do, check, and act principle also tells us to make an adequate plan on how to achieve our environmental performance by setting up the right objectives and putting structure in place that will give us those improvements. The process approach is looking at coordination of our activities in a systematic way that will give us the result at the end of each process. The self-management principles of management system generally also works here. So the customer focus, which in this case is the stakeholders, remains your focus. You are trying to ensure that all your stakeholders are not negatively affected by your environmental performance. And then you need the right leadership and you ensure that all the people are involved in the implementation process. And I just explained the process approach. And so you also should have a recurring activities that will ensure that your environmental performance improves from time to time. And any decision you are going to take about your environmental performance or achieving your environmental objectives should be based on data. You must have evidences that will give you that basis for taking the decision. And because you cannot achieve it alone, you need to manage the relationship with all the stakeholders so that you can achieve your environmental performance. This ISO 14001 is related to many other standards in that particular group, but because they are not normative references, which means that these standards that are related in this group are not compulsory that you must use them before you can say you have implemented or you go for certification, but they help you in managing specific areas to have better performance like the life cycle assessment, ecosystem, greenhouse effects, and the rest of them in this group. The structure of the ISO 14001 2015 years has shown, just like other management systems, you have clause 1 being the scope, the normative reference, terms and definition in clause 3, and then clause 4 to 10 are the ones that contains requirements. And these clauses are also arranged in systematic manner so that the clause 4, 5, 6, and 7, which talks about the context of the organization, leadership, planning, and support form your planning process. And then when you now implement the plan, it's the doing part, and performance evaluation is the checking. And then when you put a structure in place to improve the performance of the organization, that is your acting part. So it also follows the Deming's principle. The clause 4, which talks about the context of the organization, expects that we look at the factors, whether internal or external, that will help achieve the environmental objectives, and taking into consideration the interests of all the stakeholders, especially the regulatory and other stakeholders to which you are supposed to comply with their obligations. And then you now put a structure in place that processes that will ensure that you achieve these objectives. Clause 5 specifies the requirements that the top management of the organization needs to meet to ensure that the environmental performance is in line with the objective. So it specifies specific responsibilities of top management that will ensure the success of this particular program, including then specifying the direction for the environmental management system, which is the environmental policy. In the process, the management needs to define roles and responsibilities and authorities that will be in charge of this process so that there will be organized structure for achieving the objective. Clause 6 talks about planning, and the planning generally look at the risk and opportunities, the environmental aspects, which is the activities that will impact on the environment, those compliance obligations, whether from regulatory agencies or other stakeholders
to which you are supposed to comply with, and setting environmental objectives, and then putting up a structure in place that will ensure you achieve the set objectives. This gives detail by adding the steps required by you identifying the activities, products, and services that are environmentally related aspects and their impacts, and then you do like risk assessment to find out those ones that you identify as your key priority, because you may not have the resources at the same time to address all the environmental issues. So you prioritize, and then you determine those that are legal and other requirements so that you put them into your planning process. And then you set your performance objectives and targets, and then you have a program that you run to ensure that you are achieving those set objectives. Clause 7 talks about support to the environmental management system structure by providing resources for executing your programs, ensuring that the people that are handling the process are competent, they are given the adequate training that will help in managing the various processes in environmental management system. And then the organization is giving awareness so that they know exactly what they will do. Mostly communication is a problem. So the standard try to put a structure or requirements in place that will ensure that our communication are effective, and then it has a minimum documentation requirement that will also support the system. Clause 8 talks about operations, and it's basically in two folds. The first part is putting structure in place that will ensure that you have defined criteria for operating your environmental management system, and you have the plan in place to execute in line with what you set out in clause 6. Put controls in place, have your criteria, assign responsibility, and operate this structure. And then, because things can still go wrong as a human system, you now have a plan in place that will address emergencies, whether it's accident that have already occurred or anticipated, so that you put structure to overcome those challenges. Clause 9 is evaluation, performance evaluation, which is also in 3 parts. It's either monitoring, measurement, analysis, which look at the set criteria you have also put in place in clause 8. Those criteria you now measure and monitor to see whether you are in line with your set arrangement, and you evaluate to see where you need to make adjustments. The second part is the internal audit, which is like an independent assessment from people that are not from that particular process. So the first part is by the process owner. The second part is somebody that is independent of that particular process, having a look at it to give you an informed judgment on whether you are complying with the arrangement or not. And then the management of the organization now looking at whether and reviewing to see where they can make adjustments and improvements generally. So this is the structure, looking at the monitoring, measurement, analysis, your compliance obligations, and the internal audit as your input into your management system. Let's talk briefly on the benefits of the auditing. Because it's an independent process, it gives you opportunity, independent of position, or improvement opportunities and weaknesses. It also provides you factual information so that you use it to improve on the performance generally in the environmental management system. And it gives you a valid observation on the effectiveness of your arrangement, and it's a proactive method for self-assessment, because the audit, even the audit is internally done. So you have monitor your compliance, it helps you to monitor your compliance, and it's a fantastic tool in this particular structure. The management review, the standard has specified as a minimum some requirements that the management will consider at defined interval, so that they review look back to see whether they are achieving the set objectives, whether the internal and external issues have variations, whether there is need to change facility, or if facility has changed, the impact it will have in the environment, and changes of activities and other issues. So at the end of the day, it gives you information about the adequacy and suitability of and effectiveness of your environmental management system. And as an output to that particular process, they expect them to come out with decisions on effectiveness of the management system, where they can improve, need to make changes where necessary, and resource needs, among others. The last clause is clause 10, which expects that on continuous basis, you look at areas you can make improvement. So you constantly look at where you can make improvement and put action plan in place to address those. The second part of that clause specifies a structure where you can address your anomalies. And that will mean looking at the root cause of your problems and addressing them so that they do not recur in the system. And whether it's a one-off improvement you've done from beginning or along the process, that recurring activities that will may add value to the system is still required in the third part of that particular clause. So based on these, I made some suggestions that based on the people that are in this forum, that if we really want to take environmental management as a serious business, then we should look at ensuring that all our oil companies and manufacturing companies try to implement this particular standard. Construction companies, mining companies should all get to implement this particular standard so that we pay more attention to our environment. And then other organizations, even government agencies, may, even if they are not going to implement this standard, they require the knowledge in form of training or awareness creations. And then because the environment, our environment from west to east, from all over the country is becoming embarrassing. I think the regulatory agencies need to up their game. These are the suggested steps that you can use if you want to implement this particular standard. First, get the management commitment, because as long as you do not have management support, implementing this particular standard is impossible. And therefore, if you have gotten that commitment and you are ready, you need to have a champion or champions, so to say. The champions should be able to address the issues surrounding getting resources, and then also communicating with the stakeholders to ensure that the standard is implemented correctly. And then, of course, you need a budget, and then you need to have a schedule that will guide you in the implementation process. And you must have a cross-functional team that will ensure that all processes are represented. And then you involve all the employees, because it's like impossible to implement these standards if if you do not have the buy-in of your employees. And once this is done, you need to conduct preliminary review of the system to see whether from the structure you had before, because almost every organization implements environmental management system, even at home. You manage your waste, you do so many things at home that are environmentally related. But whether it complies with the requirements of the standard is a different matter, or whether it's a passive or reactive, or if it's a proactive step you are taking, determines now where to place you. So you carry out a review of the system and compare it with the requirements of the ISO 14001, see where the gaps are, and modify the existing structure you have so that you have a robust plan that will give you this particular objective. You can now go on to prepare your documentations and make your plan not too rigid that will be almost impossible to introduce any improvement. And your plan should also not be too loose so that frequent changes may discourage people because naturally we react to changes. And so you put it in moderation. And then you can train your employees, and then you can assess your performance at interval as you implement your plan. At this stage, you have options. There are 3 options. Either you implement and then you continue to improve on your performance and you stop there, or you can make a self-declaration that you have complied with this particular standard. The 3rd option is that you can go for certification, which usually
Hello.
in a 3rd-party country's recognition is there, and then you can easily integrate with other management systems. And it's applicable to all organizations of any size.
We're not hearing you.
Or however the management system has the ISO 14001 and the ISO 45001 and ISO 50001, which the difference is just in focus. The 14,000 is on environment, the 45,000 is on energy management, and the 50,001 is on energy management. Thank you for your attention. I hope we are not.
Thank you so much, sir, for this presentation. We appreciate. I would like anyone to ask if there is any question so that he can respond to it before any other thing. Hello. Please, I need anyone to ask question before we go ahead with any other agenda. Sorry.
I think coordinator, somebody should appreciate the presenter before
Hello, I raised my hand to ask a question, please. I don't know if my hand can be seen.
Yeah, I can see your hand now, sir.
we can
Okay,
see.
my name is Tukur Lawal. Thank you, Dr. Maik, for this beautiful presentation. Very rich and eloquently presented. The question I want to ask is that what kind of support do SON give to companies who are willing to implement the system, apart from just being invited to certify the system? What kind of support can SON provide to companies, especially small companies?
Well, from what I know, there was a time there was a general rebate for small and medium enterprises. They reduced the fee for them for trainings. They reduced the fee for them even in some cases certification. That's the much I know. I don't know whether they have further rebate. I'm no longer in the management system, and and I moved from training to operations. So I hope I've answered your question. So they actually support them by reducing the cost of training and the cost of certification, but basically the small and medium enterprises. Thank you, sir.
The second question I have, Dr. Maik, I know you have been in the system. We worked together about 20 years back. From my experience, what are the typical roadblocks, issues, barriers the company have in implementing the standard? And what, from a rich experience, can be the solution to those problems for a beginner company?
Okay, like I said in the presentation, the most vital tool you need is management buy-in. Unfortunately, the benefit of environmental management system structure is not a financial, and the management will also look at their financial gain. So you need their buy-in, and as long as they don't understand why they should implement this standard fully, if they don't know the benefits, you will continue to run into trouble. So you must ensure that the management is fully aware of the benefits of implementing this standard. And the second roadblock is when the employees do not understand also the benefit of this, because you need everybody to be, all hands to be on deck before you can achieve the objective. So to be sure that you achieve this, aside the resource challenge is a general one, so I will not talk about that, but at least that buy-in from management and involving all employees to help to achieve this particular objective. Okay. Hello. I hope I've answered your question. My mentor, Tukur.
Sam, I'm your boy. Permit me to not to disagree with you, but the EMS could have serious financial benefit, especially when you look at waste to wealth conversion. So for me, the financials are there right from the beginning. It helps you.
This network is something else.
Thank you so much for that response. Please, I wouldn't mind if there is any other question before I go further to the agenda.
I've been raising my hand and my hands seem to be, disappearing again.
Hey, that is sorry.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Mike. Your organization is involved in training also? You give training?
Yes, sir.
You do certification?
Yes, sir.
You do regulation?
Yes, sir.
So how do you combine all these impartially? One, and Engineer Tukur had already asked one of the questions which I wanted to ask before. How do you encourage people to certify to this and implement? Then what do you do to those who do not implement?
Okay, thank you.
What do you do? What do you do? You stop them from manufacturing?
Thank you so much. I mentioned during the presentation that the implementation of this standard is actually voluntary. It's a voluntary standard. So the implementation, unless there's a national position that all those organizations, like I suggested, must implement, unless that national position comes up, we cannot force them to get certification to ISO 10000.
Can I come in?
Hello, am I heard? So basically, the standard is voluntary. The management system standards are voluntary. Even product standards, when they are produced, unless the minister assigned to it and make it like they now did for MANCA programs, you cannot force organizations to implement them. But in Nigeria, we've made the product standards mandatory, but we've not made the management system standards mandatory. So there still remains as voluntary compliance to those standards. So that's why I was saying that the regulatory agencies should up their game when it comes to environmental management. On the aspect of impartiality, the product certification structure, which is the regulatory arm I just mentioned, is compulsory. So that one is on its own. Your products must comply with the product standards. But as for management system, the training is voluntary, the certification is voluntary. So the elements of partiality is complete and the processes are separate. The processes are completely separate from each other. So you have the training section on its own, you have the certification to the management system section in place, and then you now have the regulation is mostly on the part of the products to ensure that the product meets the required specified quality. And the benefit you were talking about, I think Mahmoud has helped me out. Yes, mostly you do not physically see the benefit of implementing this particular standard in financial terms unless you go into arithmetic. But the benefits far outweigh any resources that you put into these processes to ensure that you achieve your environmental performance. And like when I was listing the benefits, we talked about liability, we talked about cost cutting, and so many other things. So you need to do some mathematics before you can get full analysis of the benefits. And the encouragement you are talking about, I already mentioned that for small and medium enterprises, the organization have reduced the normal charges they do sometimes by giving some kind of rebate on the training and even on the certification process. Thank you, sir. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, if I may come in.
Yes.
Professor, sir, good evening. Mrs. Ayeni here.
Please, thank you very much. I saw you.
Okay. I just thought I should maybe smoothen some edges, and the engineer, Dr. Maik, has done a great presentation. I'll start from the question asked by our past president. The issue of regulation, when it comes to environment, then you're talking of NSChE and other agencies that have it as their direct mandate. So the question really is, why would we have just 29 certified companies? It comes down to the political will to drive that aspect of management system. And if you're talking of oil and gas, you can't shave oil and gas issues without putting DPR on the table. We know the peculiarity of our situation when the regulator wants to be the certifier. In the case of environment, SON is not a regulating body. SON regulates product standards. For services, for environment and other spheres of business where management system certification is required, SON has the expertise, has the accreditation. Accreditation itself is a very weighty thing, and getting accredited took decades. So there's a body for impartiality and the rest of it. And that is why when you're talking of certification generally, really, SON is one out of other available certifying bodies of choice. Just that now, bringing it down to MSMEs, just like the Office of the Vice President and this administration has been doing, SON as agency of government has the prerogative of doing discounted services. That does not mean that the quality of the service is low. So I just thought I should shed light on that aspect. Thank you. I actually had to make time because the engineer Maik worked with me. I retired from SON last year. And when I saw the notice, I said, well, whatever I have to do today has to be set aside to be part of this meeting. I appreciate his presentation. Coming to the benefit, like Engineer Tukur said, you can actually do self-declaration. I mean, it distinguishes the boys from the men. sort of, where a company feels that they have the wherewithal to drive management system in terms of environment, being responsible in relating with the environment, using best available technology and the rest of them. So it's not just because the market is requiring it in this case, but because they feel they have that duty of care, as it were. Most of the blue chip companies actually go for it because their parent bodies demand it of them, give them all the necessary backup and support. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Ma, for bailing me out.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma. Please, I would like to apologize on behalf of the moderator and the host. They are both having network challenge. I just got a message now from Engineer Mahmoud. He's on the transit, and so he has been trying to connect, but the network is very bad. So sorry for this, please.
We trust him.
And okay, thank you, sir. If there is no any other question, maybe I can.
I want to raise something.
Okay, Daddy. Thank you, sir.
Really, when I'm going back now to our training in the university. As chemical engineers, we have core subjects to take. The core subjects, for example, are thermodynamics, kinetics. That's it, core for chemical engineers. When I say kinetics, I mean physical, chemical, that is physical transport phenomena and so on and so forth, and the so-called chemical kinetics. Then all these other things, we now have to see how we can touch them, how we can touch management, how we can touch environment, how we can touch this or touch that. So I think this body, Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers, should be responsible to start looking at where we place some things. Do we push some of these things to postgraduate? After you graduate, you now decide you want to become a manager. But really, ultimately, like I used to tell my students, everybody must manage from your home, from your everything. Everybody must manage somehow. And these are some of the things which we do not have, and they say that, oh, this graduate is not properly trained on all these kind of things. How do we manage these things? I wish the chair for education is here, so that we start looking at all these things. So when we are developing our curriculum, so you could see that we need people who have industrial experience. Mr. Yeni, for example, people like you will be required to sit on the curriculum, committee, and so on and so forth. And we need people who have reason to top management also to come into this curriculum development of a thing. Because without proper curriculum, the country will not move in the direction which it should move. Thank you very much. Just general comments. I'm done. Mistura.
Sir, Professor, thank you, sir, for this interesting remark. And I would like all of us to be challenged. It's not enough to retire and stay in our study rooms with thousands of books. How do we give back to the society? I would like to see personally the INEs, the Maiks, in the faculty, join the faculty. They have a lot to contribute. So thank you, sir. You've challenged us, and I think we need to look at how we can give back to the society, how we can give back to the profession. We have learned a lot. That conserved knowledge should not be stored in the libraries, in our personal libraries. Let's share it with the young ones. Let's share it in planning and remodeling our education system. Thank you, Prof. Sir. I hope I've made myself clear. Thank you, my senior colleagues.
Very, very clear. Do you suggest that after graduation, we have, say, like 4 weeks or so, where people come in, then we gather students in various places. Thank God that we can do things virtually now. So cost of logistics will drop dramatically. We invite people, in various specialized areas to start to talk to these people. And perhaps even at that point, they may decide the direction they want to go. Do we suggest that in Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers?
and actually escalate it to NSC, or we ask current to ensure that this kind of thing is done?
Prof, I typed in something just before I went to try and halt a call.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm being heard. Incidentally, there's this industry advisory board. Incidentally, I serve on it for University of Lagos. And part of what we looked at was policy and some other things and curriculum. This just to brief this body. Along the line, we agreed that there were gaps, in management systems, in data technology, in alternative dispute resolution, all these emerging things that are new and that will create a major knowledge gap for our students. So incidentally, at the onset of COVID, the alumni, on which I also happen to be on the ESCO, now said, okay, let's have some lectures for our final year students, because the idea was, how do we touch the curriculum without going through the 4 or 5 years of going through NUC. So we had actually advanced on the planning of inviting lecturers over and the rest, and then COVID arrived on the shores of the nations. And what we did then was now through the alumni ESCO to plan this sort of online meetings for final year students. On the last count, we've had 3 lectures so far, on quality management system, on health and safety. The last one I think was on data. I can't recall the exact topic, in structural engineering, building and the rest. So with this, we're able to use resources such as myself, either retired or still in active service. And like you said, we had huge student participation. The Department of Chemical Engineering also has set up its own subset of this sort of lectures. And even Dr. Irene was part of people that are given lectures I had done on safety. So these are running parallel, apart from the central one for the faculty. And I think some of our universities can also look at this possibility. Because if we say when they come out, they should come and do 10 weeks or 4 weeks course, you never can tell, the logistics and the rest. But things such as ADR, such as handling of hazardous waste and the rest, there are experts willing and waiting to give lectures online like this. So in the comfort of people's homes and wherever, they can be part of typically a 1-hour lecture that opens their eyes to possibilities. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think we should escalate this to Education Committee, Education Sectoral Group. Ms. Sura, please take it up to Mahmoud. Luckily, Professor Kuye is here. Professor Kuye, I think Ms. Sura is no longer or something, so perhaps you can go ahead.
Hello,
Well,
sir.
thank you.
Mahmoud is back. Okay. Yeah, Mahmoud is taking over.
Go ahead, Professor Kuya, after you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks very much, my past president, Prof. Sir, for this suggestion. In fact, I think what Madam said is probably the best way to go, so that we start making use of our senior colleagues who have had the experience, and then use them to come back and talk with our students while they are still in school. They will then act as role model, and the impact will be more. Because I could remember that my being a chemical engineer today is just because of what Professor Oguye and his colleagues that time when we were in the secondary school, they came and gave a lecture, a kind of sensitization program, and that was what got me into chemical engineering. So it would be great if some of our senior colleagues, if they can come in and then be able to share their knowledge with us. I'm happy too that some of these sectorial groups, I think that's one of the best things the Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers have been able to do. by bringing each of these sectoral groups handling different areas. We in the education and research, we're focusing on the curriculum, but then like you mentioned earlier on, to change the curriculum is extremely difficult. It's not something that you can do overnight. You need current, you need NUC, and at times the two are even moving in. No, they're not really synchronizing. So I really agree, and that is one of the things we should do. Even in my own universities, that's what we have been trying to do now, to have what we call guest lectures. Not just at the end of it, for each lecture, for each course we are teaching, we'll get people to come and talk to our students. Thank God for the COVID. These are positive side of the story now of the effect. Zoom and all the other virtual platforms are now easily available. So we can use that. I think that would be the way to go. Again, too, I'm happy the sectoral group coordinator, the HSC is here. We've just finished discussing on a kind of peer-to-peer on one of the courses, the HSC related courses. And just yesterday was when I sent back the comment from the education sectoral group to him, so that they can then take it up and then be able to champion that. Thank you. So those are just my comments.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Am I being heard now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm hearing you.
Yeah. Let me apologize again for the epileptic nature of the presentation of today. A lot of things actually happened. Atta, who is coordinating the presentations, they had a security breach last night. Although he's safe and with his family, but he sent message that I should step in. Unfortunately, I did not see that message until I landed in Port Harcourt, which is about 30 minutes to the start. And being on transit with the network issues and all that, so that's where we find ourselves where we are today. But I thank God it still went well. Maik is able to do this presentation, and I'm sure it will increase the awareness with respect to managing environmental issues using a system. So we thank everybody for all the contributions that have been made. And just to weigh in on what Professor Kuye just said, and also the suggestion of Engineer Ayeni, some of these things do not necessarily have to be included in the curriculum. Individual universities, just like he said, can organize the online programs. For instance, I'm doing a program in Uniport now, and they brought a professor from a university in from US on remote sensing. It's not part of the curriculum, but he organized a workshop, 3 days, hands-on practical training. And everybody that participated was able to take home quite a lot. So this is the direction we need to go, preparing students, bringing in things that they are likely to encounter in general life after leaving the school environment, particularly with the difficulty expressed by Prof in having the curriculum change. It's actually a very tedious and difficult process. And furthermore, we need to start looking at how the professional bodies can actually influence the curriculum institutionally, not just like the way it is being done now. When the draft is ready, they will circulate it for public inputs. Each professional body should have a representation in the curricular committee, both NUC and COREM, and the two organizations should work together. So perhaps this is a position we present to council. I don't know whether this is in place, but people from the industry also, that's the market where these students will go and work. They should also have significant amount of say. You shouldn't be left just within the academic environment. So thank you very much, everybody. We've had a nice evening, and I thank everyone for participating. Thank you very much all.
Sorry, Mahmoud. All these things which you have discussed towards this end, how do we filter it to the secretariat or to?
We include it in our report to the next council meeting, and we also copy Professional Affairs Committee, which is the committee that actually filters out policy issues and make the society's position to relevant bodies. And also, in addition to that, I think the sectoral groups should also be part of that professional affairs. Just, I was discussing with MTH, the coordinator of the midstream, and he suggested that we create a forum, which we've already done, so that we'll be coordinating activities, because there's really nothing one committee will be doing that does not impact on, and one sectoral group will be doing that does not impact on another one. So this is a position that we are going to discuss among ourselves before the next council meeting, in view of integrating these sectoral groups into the Professional Affairs Committee, which is a think tank of the society for policy issues. Because all these discussions that we are having here, it shouldn't remain here. It's something that needs to be carried forward and taken up to the relevant agencies, so that we'll be able to effect the positive change we desire. Thank you, sir.
Well done.
So, in the absence of any other further discussion now, may I call on any volunteer to give us a closing prayer?
Engineer Maik, why don't you pray for us?
Thank you, sir. So let's pray. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdinas siratal mustaqim, siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim, ghayril maghdubi alayhim wa lad-dallin.
Amen.
Thank you.
Okay, we meet again last Saturday of September. God willing.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening, all.
Good evening.
Thank you. You managed to,
Thank you, Anna, for
you managed to come in.